Hi, welcome to 92. We're a 92-year-old podcast.
Year?
I'm just kidding. This is Artcasters. This is our 92nd episode, and with us is Scott Serkland. Oh, I'm Joshua Kemble. With us is Scott Serkland.
How's it going, everyone?
And we should say this at the top, too. Where can we find your work?
Me, you can find my work at circworks.com or madsciencesupplycompany.com. I got a bunch of new stuff up there, shirts and buttons and all kinds of stuff. Oh, and I got like blind test tubes. I call them test tubes, but it's basically like an art tube full of stuff. Kind of like a loot crate type thing. So I got that up there now too. So yeah, a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. For a second, I thought you said nudes, not nudes.
No, it's a mystery tube, so you may get some nudes in there. I don't know. I can't guarantee. You may get lucky. Oh, and of course, I'm Circworks Art Labs on YouTube.
Nice. And then we have special guest Mike Emirates with us as well today. Mike,
Shimon.
where can we find your stuff?
You could find me at Mike Emirates on Instagram or here on YouTube or on Facebook or the Twitters, pretty much anywhere. Yeah.
All right. So basically, like, while we're all working on our projects and stuff, let's get into the kind of the topic. So the idea this week, something that's been fresh on my mind. If you look at the title below, it's go hard or go home, which is totally like a jock phrase, and I'm definitely not like an athlete or anything like that, as you can see from my physique. I'm definitely not athletic. But I think the meaning of it and what I think we can kind of start diving into this week, or not this week, this show. This is a week-long stream. But I think what we can start for the show is just this idea that I've had kind of throughout the week. I've been kind of stumbling upon artists that are kind of lazy, and these aren't artists that like are subscribed to my channel or anything like that. But like artists that like they'll draw for like 10 minutes and be like, I did a good job, I drew, I'm taking myself out to the bar as a reward. And kind of overdoing the like taking breaks thing, like to where their kind of passion seems to be more about taking breaks than doing art. And so I actually wanted to kind of get into the idea of like the work part of artwork, and kind of like how if you really want to do this thing, whatever it is, you kind of need to go at it like hard as hell, or basically just go home, because there's no like half doing it. And so I don't know, I thought that would be a good topic for tonight. I want to kind of open it up and see if that brings anything out for you guys that's on your mind. Right?
Well, as far as rewarding yourself by going out to the bar, I have a solution to that. It's called a drink and draw. So you can drink and draw at the same time.
2 for 1.
You do that at a bar, or you can do what I'm doing and just drink right here while we're doing the Artcasters. So
yeah,
it's called multitasking.
Multitask. Do your reward and your work at the same time. What about you, Mike? Like, what does that bring anything to mind? Like for you, just like kind of lazy artists, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a hard thing to get into. It's a hard thing to get good at. It's a hard thing to do no matter what it is that you're trying to do. And it takes a lot of time and effort, So it's like, I don't know. I don't know how to like break into the topic, but I guess I could kind of just take it from the angle of like my personal experience over the last couple of years has been, even when you think you're going hard, sometimes you're not going hard enough, depending on where your goals are. You know what I mean? So like for me, for example, I always considered myself an art professional, or at least I was trying to be. And I thought I was working hard enough. I thought I was putting enough time and effort into my portfolio. I thought I was drawing enough and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, like something clicked. I can't even say how or you know, why, but something clicked and I realized, no, man, you're really not. You're taking more breaks than you are working. You need to put the time in, you know? And ever since then, I realized, damn, there's a lot more to it. You know, you got to plan your days. You got to schedule your time. You got to, you know, really put more emphasis on like getting your nose to the grindstone and actually putting in the work. And it ended up being a lot harder than I thought it was, you know? I don't know if that helps to kind of like break into the topic, or I could go on forever about it. That's been my life the last like 3 years, has been like, how much harder can I go?
Yeah, and like that's kind of why I wanted to bring this up, because like in the past we've gotten into, because of the fact that I think we're all pretty driven people, and having like a strong drive to do something can have a really negative aspect to it, where it's like you know, like my own case, you know, I've had to learn how to basically balance, like, you know, taking breaks with work, because I have a serious problem with taking breaks. Like I'll forget to eat. You know, I'll kind of lose track of like the other kind of important things in life, like just, you know, seeing friends or like going out, whatever. I usually like had the adverse problem where and that would eventually affect my art, right? Because you'd end up with burnout, which is something I occasionally still have issues with and stuff like that. So we've kind of talked about like, to avoid burnout, like, you know, get out of the house, like go take a break, like that kind of thing. But it just dawned on me, like, I don't know if we've talked enough about just like the fact that like it, also don't be too soft on yourself, you know, like don't beat yourself up when you're getting into art, but like part of what separates people who are serious about art from people who aren't is just like a actual commitment to it, you know?
Oh, totally.
I don't know if that kind of.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think about back when I was in college, you know, the teachers used to all tell us, you know, out of everybody that's applied to school and is in school now in your current class, only 30% of you are going to get on to graduating. And out of that 30%, only 30% of those are actually going to get into the industry and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And the one thing that they used to always tell us is that it has nothing to do with skill. It has nothing to do with grades. It has everything to do with showing up every day. You know, if you can show up every day and give it your best, then you're going to be one of those 30%. But if you can't do that, then there's the door. Like they were really, I had a couple teachers that were really blunt like that. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. But they were so right. And as it wound up, I ended up being one of those people. Like I dropped out of school eventually because I couldn't juggle it with the rest of my life. But it was always kind of frustrating for me to, like, I've always loved this stuff. It's just, there's never been anything else. It's just art and drawing and writing and anything creative that I could get my hands on. That's just what I want to do with all of my time. Like to the point where it's kind of a problem sometimes. It's not anymore because I've accepted it. It's like, all right, well, this is who I am. If you want to come over and draw, we can be friends. If not, well, you know, maybe go elsewhere. But aside from that, you know, it always like, it confuses me when I hear people say something like, oh, I didn't feel like drawing today, or, oh, I just can't think of anything to draw, or, well, I put in a little bit of time, I'm going to go watch a television show or whatever. Like, I just can't relate. I don't even know where to begin to like unpack that and even understand that, you know, because this is just what I've always done and what I always want to do. So when I'm feeling like lazy, quote unquote, it's because like, all right, I drew in my sketchbook today, but I didn't do anything else. You know, it's never like, oh, I haven't done anything today. Yeah. So yeah, I think when a lot of people tell other people that they need to push themselves, it's not even really that they need to push even that hard. It's just, hey, at least, you know, do a little bit, at least sketch in the sketchbook, you know. And I think that advice comes from a good place. I don't think it's pushy. I don't want to, anybody that's listening, I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to say that like, well, if you want to do art at all, you have to do it all the time, because people want different things, you know. I think if you're doing it as a hobby and you just enjoy it, then you can do whatever you want. I think it's coming from a place of like, if you're trying to be a professional, then it's like, you really need to be at this stuff all the time, like harder than you even can stand at some points. Because if you're not, someone else is, and they're going to get the job. They're going to get the, you know, the opportunity, especially with comics. I mean, geez, like you look at it now and it's like, we're going through another era where they're keeping people on books for a long time. So it's like, if you really want to break into comics, it's like, you got to be as good as like the top 12 people. If that's your goal, you know, 12 people out of the world, you got to be that good. So like, if you want to get that good, then you might have to skip Game of Thrones every now and then and like put in some time, I guess. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling now, but
no, I think so like, okay, so there's a couple things that like I want to kind of touch on from that. Like, one is like, I'm not going to be as nice. Meaning, like, I don't think you should bother being a hobbyist at art. I don't think, like, you know, I think that if you really want to get good, I'm not talking about, like, professional, I'm just talking about good, because it's easy to get a paycheck. And it's not easy to get a paycheck. It's just, it can be easy to convince people to buy something. But and there are some people who like aren't that great at art and make tons of money at it. But if you want to get good at art, that's kind of what I want to get into, because the point being, like, it takes dedication, and why it takes dedication is because, you know, there's weirdos like me who really like art, and every day that I get off of work, I go home and I work on my graphic novel. I'm going to end up with a graphic novel. That's how, you know? And it's going to be a good-looking graphic novel because I'm taking my time on it. And I'm not being cocky by saying that, because there are people who are faster than me, who are more dedicated than me, who have more time to dedicate. And those people will have a graphic novel sooner than I will. And you know, a lot of them at higher quality. That maybe they put in more hours drawing. Maybe they have that initial skill, like before learning like the basics, like there is kind of a talent for it too. So maybe they have more of the talent thing, but the point being, like, to me, I feel like there are a lot of amateurs in a professional sport field, like in a professional sports arena or whatever. And I don't even watch sports, so it could be any sport. It could just be a sport called sports.
Sports ball.
Go play. Like, it is a competitive thing, and it's not a competition to like score goals. It's a competition to get good. And if you're at the point where you think you're good, you're probably not there yet. You know, if you're kind of at that forever working on it and just dedicating to it, I think that's kind of how you're going to get better. But and I think that's the name of, like, that's the whole point of art. So whether you're a hobbyist or not, you know, I think I don't know, maybe it's my mood today, but I think art can be a really powerful thing. And so when you're playing with power and you're doing something that could potentially communicate something very powerful to people, whether it's humor or like entertainment or whatever, it can be a very powerful thing for somebody. It can be the show that got a kid through childhood, or
totally.
It can be like the thing that made you laugh when you had a crappy day, you know? But like, you know, I was just thinking about it. I was thinking about, like, how many, like, people who do like stand-up comedy or any other entertainment, like, are like, oh, I worked on my bit for 5 minutes. I'm gonna go have a day off because I earned it. You know, I don't think there's a lot of entertainment fields where people have that kind of a lazy attitude about art, and for some reason I've just stumbled upon that a lot this past week, and it's been very frustrating, because I'm like, once again, I am a person who like I dedicate myself heavily to art, and so today, and this might be a mood thing, but today it's just it's kind of gotten me pissed off because it's just like because like some of these people call themselves cartoonists, and that to me is like an insult to cartoonists, and maybe that's too heavy-handed. I don't know. Like somebody balance me out, I guess, with that. But
just to go with the theme of the show, I have to say that's harsh, bro. No, but I was going to go back to what you were saying before, where you're talking about there's people that are better and faster than you that will have the comic done. But there's also going to be people that are better and faster than you that aren't going to have their comic done because they aren't putting in the effort. You know, may have reached a point where, or maybe, you know, certain people it comes easier than other people. But dedication says a lot. So you don't necessarily have to be, you know, the best. And I'm not talking about you, of course, Josh, but just going off of what you were saying. But you're putting in the time and the effort, and you're going to have something done, you know. Whereas somebody who maybe, I see that with like my kids. Like my kids are like super smart. They're like the kind of kids that don't really need to study and they can ace tests. I was never like that. I would study all the time and I would just fail it. So it comes easy to them. So, you know, it seems like, you know, in a lot of ways they're super lazy, you know. So sometimes with the people that are, you know, that it just comes naturally, they kind of take it for granted, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's
true.
I've seen that like in my own experience in art school. You know, and I've said this before, but like a lot of the people who did, like people I know now, you know, it's been almost 10 years or whatever, actually a little longer than 10 years since I left like graduate school. And like the people I know right now who are all working professionally as artists work their asses off and continue to. They, you know, when they like, and some of them still have, you know, day jobs that aren't art related, but when they get home, they hustle, they work, and I mean, it's a serious dedication. So it's like, you know, for others that were like really good, like some of the best people in my undergraduate class were like A students, and then they got out and they weren't used to having to like fight for it. And so like the second they were like, ooh, this is actually kind of challenging, like, because the pond turns into an ocean, you know, and suddenly you're, you know, fighting to get food against a billion big fish, you know, and they didn't do so well. Like not all of them. There are some that are like are still like incredible. One of my favorite classmates, like working in film and stuff like that, and they were always excellent at it. But along with that was like the work, because like once again, it's like you know, if you think of it like I think sports are unfortunately kind of an analogy that has to happen with this kind of conversation. But it's like, if you think about like a boxer, you know, like if you're born like really big and built and you just like build muscle really easily, you're going to have like an early advantage with something like a fight, right? Because you're a big guy, like you're born big, you know, you have like that advantage already instilled in you. It's a genetic advantage. But if you know, if you don't train and then you step into the ring with like people who like every single day for like 4 to 5 hours are just hitting a boxing, whatever that's called. I don't even know what that's called.
Boxing thingamabob.
The big sock thing that they punch. But anyhow, so you know, somebody's like literally just practicing their punch for like 5 hours a day, and you step in the ring, no matter how big you are. I mean, there's always exceptions, but the point being, like, you know, you're gonna, most of the time, it's not gonna treat you too well because like it does take a lot of practice and dedication to get good at something. And people who take things seriously are gonna do that, you know. And if you're not taking it seriously, like like for me, as an artist who takes it seriously and does it every day, it just starts to piss me off, you know, honestly. And that's why it's so cool. Like, it's cool to have you on, Mike, because you're somebody I see taking your craft very seriously. Like,
oh yeah,
going through this whole kind of crazy thing, like with, and it's not crazy like legit crazy. It's ambitious is what I would say, but it's cool because it's ambition that kind of requires a lot of legwork. So do you want to kind of get into that a little bit, like what you've been doing?
Sure. Yeah. What was that, Scott? You kind of broke up.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I'm getting a phantom Scott. Actually, I wanted to touch on something else really quick about what you had said. I'm reminded of I had a bit of an interaction actually in one of the comics groups. I think it was like last week or something, where, and this kind of does relate to what I'm doing right now. Somebody was still in high school. They were 17, and they were talking about how they needed to get good at art in 2 years. Like they needed to get to master it, and they only had 2 years. They used that exact language. I only have 2 years. I have to master art. And I'm like, I'm laughing already thinking about it. Okay, you're gonna master all of art in 2 years. But I was trying to help them, so I was asking a little bit more about what the situation was, and her excuse was that if she didn't master art in 2 years, she was going to have to live at home and she was going to have to get a job. But if she could master art in 2 years, then somehow that was just going to enable her to go to an art school, and that would solve all of her problems. And she just wouldn't see it any other way. She's like, if I have to live at home and I have to have a job, then there's just no other way. There's no way I'm going to practice. And, I asked her, I'm like, well, what's your time frame like, like what kind of job would you need to get? She's like, oh, well, I'd have to get a part-time job and I'd have to go to school. I was like, okay. So we figured out the hours, and it turned out that she would have had like 4 hours out of the day to do art. And I was like, so what's the problem? Like, if that were your worst case scenario, what's the problem? Like, that's fine. 4 hours is more than most people have that want to do this kind of thing that aren't already doing it. 4 hours is a lot of time. You could learn a lot in 4 hours for, many years. And she's like, oh, but that's just not enough because I got to hang out with my friends and I got to do this and I got to do that. I'm like, well, there's your problem. Because when I was 15, I got a worker's permit. And I'm going to go on like an old man rant now, but when I was 15, I got a worker's permit. I was already working before I was even, out of high school. And that was like my life. I still managed to get work done though. I used to spend all night at a local Denny's just hanging out. And it was a weird crowd. There was a lot of like bikers and truckers, and it was like the total hangout for like all the punks in the neighborhood, like people that were just way older than I was. And sometimes my friends would go there too, but I was working a part-time job and going to school, and I would hang out at the Denny's. I would sneak out some nights if I had to, just so that I could be around other people that were awake and would keep me awake so that I could draw. And I would just draw. That was just what I did for years. And then when I got a little bit older, when I was about her age, like about 17 or 18, I got another part-time job because I had to work. Like, we had no choice. So I got a job at UPS. I had to wake up at like 1 a.m. and I worked until 9 a.m. And then I would go to school from UPS. And then I would get off of UPS and I would still draw and I would still write. And throughout that whole time, even working a part-time job and going to high school, I managed to write a whole book, a novel, because every chance I had on the backs of receipt tapes, on, packing slips or whatever I had around me, I was writing, I was drawing, I was doing what I had to do. I was putting in the time because even though my situation sucked, the writing was more important to me. The drawing was more important to me. To me, that was my life. That was my way out. That's what I needed to be doing. All the rest of that shit was just circumstance, I knew that if I really wanted what I wanted, I had to do it anyways. And not doing it was not an option. It was like, that was like telling me like, oh, you can't poop anymore. Like, well, that's a problem. Like, I can't, I have to do that, Yeah. And so I've kind of always been like this, and no matter what situation I've got into, I've tried to find a way to draw or to write or whatever it is that I got to do. When I lived in the city and I would go back and forth to work and to school, then I would get all my work done on the train because that was sucking up all my time. You know, I had no extra time. So I would do my work on the train. And there was times that, you know, I was working for a hospitality company, and I would have receipt tapes in my pocket full of drawings and full of writings, and they'd be covered in soup and whatever. And you just stick them in a notebook and type them up, you know, when you get home, kind of thing. Yeah. Like, you just make it work. You just do whatever it is that you had to do. And I think that can be another definition of go hard or go home. It doesn't mean that you have to do anything extra. It means like you have to care about what you're doing, you know? Yeah. It has to matter. And if it doesn't matter, then you at least need to respect the fact that to some other people, it matters more than anything. It matters a lot, you know? Because I feel you when you were talking about getting upset when talking with some people. I get really upset when talking with people that kind of act very passively about art and like, oh, you know, it's just something to do, just screwing around. And they say it in a way that implies that they feel like you're connecting somehow. It's like, yeah. no. We're not on the same page.
Like the billionth novelist, like every person I've met, when they find out like I'm writing something, are like, oh, I have a novel, I have a book, I have this, I'm a writer too. And I'm like, what have you written? And they're like, I just have these ideas, I haven't really sat down. I'm like, that's not being a writer, that's a fantasy. That's a fantasy.
Yeah.
You're now communicating to me, hey, you know what, like, you're as much of a writer as I'm a spaceman. Like, I'm not like an astronaut because I didn't study astrophysics. I didn't like learn anything about, you know, being an astronaut. In my area, there are people who are actually astronauts because we're really close to like NASA, right?
Oh, that's cool.
How crazy would I be to like be talking to like a physicist or like an astronaut and be like, you know, I was thinking about being an astronaut too. Like, just, you know, or worse yet, walking up to one and going, oh, you're an astronaut, I'm an astronaut as well. I mean, the instant thought they're going to think is that I'm like a candy kid who's going to raves or something, you know? Like, they're not, like, nobody's going to take that seriously in most fields. But for some reason, and you know, this might lead to a different tangent, but for some reason, I think it's partially because, like, there's this idea of art that our society is, like, shoved down people's throat. And unfortunately, it's perpetuated online where it's like, hey, you know, like, you're not feeling good, just paint a painting because it's all about feelings. And it's all about, like, how you feel about your stuff. And it's not. Like, art is something that is visually shared. And so by visually sharing, it's any form of language. There's a two-way responsibility to that, to communicate something. And, like, and the thing that annoys the shit out of me about the I'm a communicator is it's like walking up to a really hilarious comedian who like refines and practices a bit to the extent where they can say like a joke and it sounds like, you know, you're hanging out with friends because it's so funny. It's like those peak moments in your life where you heard something really funny in a car that your friend said, but they do it so smoothly it feels that casual. It's not. It's like they work their butts off. They refine it. They go to like clubs and bomb and then work on their bit until they can be that funny. But I'm sure, and I hear this like because I love comedy. I'm not a comedian, and I hear this all the time on podcasts about comedy that comedians are constantly meeting people who are like, oh, that's cool, you're a comedian, I'm pretty funny, and then they'll continue to be like the least funny person on the planet because you know like everybody, you know, odds are if you doodle on a piece of paper enough times, you might end up with a decent sketch. That doesn't make you an artist. You know what I mean? What makes you an artist is like actually looking at that doodle and then doing exactly what you're doing, Mike, which is like hitting the books. Like you draw the doodle and you're not happy with it, so you go back and you go like, what is wrong with this doodle? You know? Yeah. And it's a long, arduous process. And it's less arduous for some in entry, but when it comes to practice, especially professionally, like, you know, you've got to be kidding me if you think that people aren't going to, like, people who are working hard aren't going to have an advantage, you know. Now, anyhow, I feel like, Scott, I want to hear your take on it. What do you think?
No, I mean, I mean, you guys are hitting all the right points. I mean, I don't know what to add really, other than just to repeat what you guys are saying. So, yeah, I mean, it is. I do kind of get upset when I hear, you know, people that I don't have the time to do this because I think to myself, well, you know, I'm a dad. I got 3 kids. I work a full-time job. I've got, you know, when I get home, it's like another full-time job, just working on my own stuff. So, you know, the time is there, and I still feel like I waste time. You know,
Yeah.
You know, I've been thinking real hard. I really want to start, you know, doing, you know, work in my sketchbook, because there's times, you know, say if I'm over at my girlfriend, I'm kind of out of. If I'm at my house, I've got all my stuff here, and I kind of got an issue as far as, you know, I got problems as far as doing like mobile art, like if I'm away from my house, because that's kind of like my comfort zone. If I'm here, I've got all my stuff here and everything, but if I'm not there, you know, sometimes I'll just be on my phone, you know, or whatever. But I really, you know, I started bringing a sketchbook over there, and so if I have downtime or whatever, I can just jot something down in my sketchbook. But that's something I really need to work on as well. So I mean, even with, you know, I think I'm pretty productive and pretty much a workaholic, but it still seems like I've got time that I'm wasting. So I don't know.
So I feel like that's one of the reasons I wanted to touch on this too, because that brings up a really good point, which is like kind of what got me thinking about this is like I was thinking about it on my ride home today, and I did one panel yesterday. And keep in mind, like, some of my panels that would be excusable, but yesterday it was like this little tiny panel. It's got 2 characters, really simplified background, and you know, the other 2 days I had managed to knock out like about 4 panels like a day, and just in pencils, not like finished. And even though like I want to take my time and I want to make sure this is good, I realized that yesterday I was listening to my own justifications, like, oh, you worked hard, take a break. Like, that is a battle for me, I feel. And yet like I often am asked by people, like, how do you get so much done? And yet I don't, like, as much as I should. And I think I need to keep that attitude. As much as I need to remind myself to take breaks, I also need to keep in mind, like, this is serious. Like, art is serious, at least for me. It may not be serious for you, but if it's not serious, why are you messing with it? You know, like.
Well, I may not be as hardcore as you, but I mean, I don't see a problem with somebody that just wants to do art for fun or a hobby or an escape or just as like therapy or whatever. What?
You are hardcore. You're doing it.
No. I'm talking about as far as it's almost it's coming across like don't do art unless you really want to be a professional and everything. And I don't know if that's exactly what you mean or not. Which I think if you want to be a professional, yes, you got to do what we're talking about. But I don't see anything wrong with somebody that just finds it fun and just wants to do it, you know, for the heck of it or whatever, and who doesn't really have aspirations of, you know, being a great artist.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good point. I should probably qualify what I'm saying. So let me put it this way. Like, if you like playing, I'm going to keep with the sports analogy. You like playing Madden. That's great. Keep playing your video game. Don't get on the field because you're okay at Madden and start claiming you're a football player because you're not. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I get it. Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. Is like I feel like this last week or so, like, for me, I just keep, I don't know what it is that kind of, it's like I go to the supermarket and I overhear somebody talking about, like, oh, I'm an artist, and they're describing themselves, and I'm like, you're not an artist. You're somebody who, like it just annoys me. It's like, don't take the title. Just don't take the title. And like, if you're somebody who enjoys drawing and you have fun with it, like, great. But like, to me today, maybe it makes me a dick. I don't know. But like, it just feels like coming from, you know, the people who like are working day in, day out about this, like, if they only get one panel done a day, are beating themselves up. Like, you know, or Scott, in your case, it's like you want to finish this pack of what, like 200 drawings, right?
Oh,
and you're like,
I'm beyond that, but yeah.
what I'm saying is it's hundreds of drawings that you're beating yourself up about not having finished yet, you know? And yet the weird thing is, meanwhile, there's some guy who's like sketching and like playing at it, and they're not making anything, and then they're calling themselves like professional artist or a cartoonist. And it's like, to me, that kind of irks me. Now, like, this is totally different if you're a kid, right? Because if you're a kid and you want to play football or whatever, then, you know, obviously you got to start in Little League and you work your way through it, right? And if you really want to do it, you're going to have to train, like, for a lot of your life, right? Because then otherwise you'll be competing with people who've been playing since they were, like, 2. Same with if you want to play, like, piano. Like, if I took up piano today, I'm not going to be as good as somebody who, like, started at 2 and started by playing, like, I'm trying to remember, like Traffic Cop. I don't know if you guys know piano stuff, but like that's like the intro to piano song. You know, and it doesn't sound good. It's not a complicated song, but you know, you have to start somewhere. So my point is, start, you know, have fun with it. Like, don't forget that it's fun, but also like just don't allow yourself to justify like shitty behavior, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. Wow, I'm kind of pissed today.
No, it makes sense. I think the biggest point to make, though, is like it's not like it offends. I mean, obviously it upsets our artists because we all get upset about this stuff, but it's more a disservice to yourself. If you're saying you're serious about art and you actually want these things, it's a disservice to yourself to be lazy about it and to not only be lazy about it, but then to lie to yourself and say that that's good enough. You know, like it's not. You need to put in the time and the effort, or you're just in for heartbreak later on. You know, like if it's really important to you, then you've really got to talk to the people that are doing it and like get advice from them. What are they doing? You got to do what they're doing. Get to that level, put in that amount of effort. You know, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They kind of, I don't know if it's an ego thing or if it's a lazy thing, or maybe it's like, I don't know, like maybe it's just the dream is the appealing part, not actually achieving the goal of it. I don't know what it is, but it's like there's a disconnect with a lot of people. It's almost like they want the fame for being an artist without actually like just putting in the work to do the art. But I think anybody that's actually interested in art isn't even necessarily interested in the fame of anything, because what's the point of that? You just want your art to be good. And in a way, I guess indirectly, you hope for recognition from your peers. I think at least I do. Like I feel very proud when I get compliments from people that are, you know, good artists or that I respect as artists. But it's like, that's just a moment for me. I don't hang on that and ride that. It's like, okay, good, back to the journey. You know, it's not, I don't do it for that. That's just nice. It's like it's like running a marathon and someone just handed you a sippy cup of water along the way. It's like, okay, great, that was refreshing, carry on, you know.
And here's the thing, like you like, we're in a world where, you know, you can get very far on deception. Like you can lie to a lot of people and probably succeed. I mean, that's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. So the best case scenario for somebody who's like BSing and not trying to get better at art is they get really well known and their art never improves. And when actual artists look at it, they're gonna know. They're gonna know it. When people say they like it, a lot of that kind of stuff is going to be because other people said they like it. That's why they like it. You know, they like the one song. You know, it's the one-hit wonder band or whatever. You're the odd person who made it. But the point being, like, I don't think making it like financially dictates like that you're at the end of your journey. You know, there's plenty of artists I can think of that are well known, and I'm not going to name them because I'm old enough to, you know, to know that's not a wise thing to do. But I mean, like published, like legit professional artists who aren't that good, and somehow they have a great personality, maybe they're easy to work with. There's other factors, like we've gotten into that on this show, you know. But like at the same time, like I I think that like at the end, your reward is just going to be financial. And to me, like that's the silliest driver to get into art for, you know?
Yeah.
Because if you wanna kind of just like fool people and hustle and get paid for something, do something other than art. Like be a lawyer, you know? Like you'll make a ton more money. But if you want to be a good artist and you manage to make a living while you're getting better, because I by no means think I'm at the end of that. Like I don't think I'm as good as I should be at all. And I don't think anybody in this conversation would think that about themselves. Like I think we all kind of want to get to a point and we're not quite there, and we're constantly working to get there, you know?
Yeah, I definitely, you know, I'm right there with you, because I'm thinking, you know, because I am in a position where I kind of do this for a living, and I do get to draw all day, so my work is improving. But then I look at what Mike's doing right now, where he's taking time to go back and kind of learn the basics, because where I was fortunate enough to get hired doing artwork right out of college, I missed some of that education. And there's things that you know, I really I could work on, just basic things that if you skip over, you kind of find a way around them, and you kind of figure out a way to work with it. And I mean, there are certain things that I improve as I go, but if I was to put some time aside and really go back to basics and things like that, kind of like what Mike's doing, I think, you know, it would be really helpful. But then then I have to think, well, I got to what kind of time do I trade for that? You know, because there's products and things that I want to finish and get out there that can, you know, help support me and my family, and there's the job and stuff like that. So it's like, you know, I don't know. It's like, I know I could be a lot better, but it's like, sometimes it's like, well, I'm good enough. I'm good enough to make a living, even though, like I said, I'm improving because I draw all the time, but maybe not in certain areas that I just don't have time to concentrate on. And then sometimes you think it's like, well, am I just polishing a turd because I'm kind of building on something that wasn't there to begin with?
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know.
But like, to me, okay, so like that in itself, what you just said, I think is an example of why I get furious at like people who claim they're artists, or like, you know, I draw happy faces. I used to draw when I was a kid, that kind of attitude. Like I think what infuriates me about it is I don't think they realize like professionals in this field who are getting better or having output, like if you go to somebody's website and they have like 50 posters, like Scott, if you guys were to like say, go to Scott's website right now and check out like all the posters in his shop, like those didn't just make themselves. Like that's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of love and a lot of time, like arithmetic that we kind of, all of us who are making this stuff have to go through, where it's like, okay, I have to work on this thing. So if I'm going to get so many panels done a day, that means I'm having to add this, which means I have to subtract this. And whatever that is, that thing that I'm subtracting is the thing that the phony ass artist is like watching the most recent episode of Game of Thrones, and I'm drawing. And then they're talking to me about, man, I wish I could get pages done as fast as you. And I'm like, I'm not fast at pages, and I'm not getting them done as fast as I'd like. Like Holly Brown is in the chats. She's super fast, you know, like, and yet, like, and I'm not that quick at pages. But the point being, like, the only thing that's separating me from the guy who's full of shit, and that's what I mean, is like they're sincerely full of shit when they're talking about being cartoonists or whatever, is the fact that like they chose Game of Thrones over comics. They chose the bar over comics. And there are times where that's a good thing, but if you look at the percentage of time that you're choosing other things than the thing you're claiming to have your lifestyle be, I think the percentage has to be like, when you have time, at least like I'd say like over 50% of your time should be spent on whatever it is that you're passionate about. You know, I think anything less than that, and you're just kind of lying. I don't know if that's silly or not. You know, I don't know. Is that too extreme? Maybe.
No, I do like Game of Thrones though, but that's like
I love Game of Thrones.
That's like one of the only shows I watch, and it's only like 10 episodes. So it's like I judge like TV shows. If somebody like I started watching, I was watching, what was that? I was watching that show Troll Hunters. It's an animated show, Guillermo del Toro. So I started watching it, and I was really digging it. And then I go, Netflix show. It's probably like 10 episodes. I look, and it was like 23 to 30 episodes. I'm like, that's too much of an investment. So I stopped watching it, and I switched over to Voltron because it was only like 6 episodes or 10. So
but Troll Hunters is so good.
I know.
That's the thing. Like I binge watch stuff. I've watched every episode of Troll Hunters. It's what I'm getting at is like not that you. I love Game of Thrones. I'm looking forward to watching the next episode of Game of Thrones. The point isn't that you can't have fun and stuff like that. I also want to really reiterate the fact that like if you want progress, it's gonna take work. It doesn't just happen. And the thing that's what makes me angry is like if you watch Game of Thrones, I love Game of Thrones. If I had that sacrifice to make art, and then you're coming to me and telling me you're an artist, and you don't sacrifice anything for what you're claiming, it really kind of it just gets me mad.
I don't think it's like one show. Like I watch shows, and I one thing and I've been going to like movies, so it's take 3 hours off, go see a movie or whatever. But if you're just constantly, that's all you're doing is watching show after show or playing video game after video game. I mean, you've gotta moderate that.
Yeah, Ollie said that's why I don't play video games, have a social life, or watch anything but 40 minutes of cartoons a week. So like you have to sacrifice it, and that's the point. Like some people would look at Holly's work and be like, "Oh, that's easy, and I can do that." No, like you can't. And if you could, you would be doing it because she's doing it and doing pretty well with it. You know what I mean? Like it takes work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of hustling, and like it just gets irritating when I hear the kind of feel good version of art where it's like. Or people bring up Van Gogh and be like, he made this body of work in 2 years. Yeah, and when he was making it, he drove himself nuts and offed himself because he was crazy into his art, like probably too into it. Guy needed breaks. You know what I mean?
That's going a little too far, I think.
Yeah. I don't think that. Like to me, if you're at that point with art, just become a punk. Like if I got that bad with art, I would go somewhere else and pursue something else. But my point being like that like there aren't a lot of examples that I honestly can't think of any examples where I've met a cartoonist. Like I always think I'm going to meet cartoonists who have it easier, where I'm like, oh, this has got to be easy and fun for this guy. Like, even going to the National Cartoonist Society, a lot of these guys are like New Yorker cartoonists and like, oh, you're writing gags. That must be fun. In my head, I think that it's easier for other people. Maybe that's a way to just keep myself trying to compete. But then I meet them and it's like, no, they might be spending more time than I am to do one panel just to come up with the concept, Yeah. And
that's not easy. A gag a day strip, that is not easy.
No, and to say it all in one panel, to me, that like blows my mind. In fact, that's something I'd love to. Like that's kind of what you were talking about, Scott, where it's like I'd love to go back and kind of train in that, there are so many things in art that are so exciting and cool to be able to spend time with. I just don't understand why people wouldn't like want to do that. Like, because for me, if I have one day where I go to a movie and I sit in a movie theater, even just that hours of movie theater, even if I'm really enjoying it, like in the back of my mind, there is always this persistent like, yeah, but I can't wait to work on my comic,
Yeah.
It's just weird, and like I said, I don't understand if you're spending more time playing video games than doing your art. Then frankly. You're either not an artist or you're really talented, and you could be so much more talented if you took out the video games. Not all the time, but you know what I mean? I don't know. Because I know
depends on your personality too. Like I had to cut them out completely. I was a huge gamer for a long time. I mean, I was even pursuing game design for many years, and I realized how much of a problem it was with them just even being in my life. It was just like I recognized that if I got into a game, I was taking away time that I would be spending on art for like a month or two. You know, it would get to the point where the time that I would be spending on my comics or studying or whatever, it would all get sucked up, every spare moment and then some, because then I would be awake later playing the stupid game.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to finish by saying I just had to cut them out completely. It was just a small sacrifice, you know? I mean, they're fun, but I've had a long time playing games. I could hang them up because this is way more important to me, you know? I still like playing games occasionally. Like Mel and I will play multiplayer games once in a blue moon. But that's like an activity where I'm spending time with her too. And it's usually on the weekends. It doesn't take away any time from anything ever whatsoever. But if I'm playing by myself, that's a whole different story. I had to uninstall everything, got rid of the discs and everything, just threw them in the dumpster. I didn't even want to give myself the time to try to sell them on eBay or something. She's like, gone, done.
Yeah, even when I was in game design, I mean, when I first started, when I got my first game design job, you know, somehow the topic came up. What games do you play? And I'm like, I don't really play any games. And they're like, and then I almost immediately regretted it because I'm like, well, I'm trying to get a job here as a game designer. And then they basically said, well, that could be a good thing or that could be a bad thing. I don't know. And then but I think in the end, it came down to because, and, you know, other than when I was a kid, you know, like Atari and stuff like that, I never played I was just never good at them, I guess. So it wasn't something I pursued. And then, so other than that, you know, I didn't really have a knowledge of how a lot of gameplay worked and everything, but there were enough of the people that worked there that did, and I think I brought something different to it because I came with a different perspective. My perspective was more storytelling because what I lacked in you know, game mechanics and things like that, I knew storytelling because I wrote comics and I, you know, paid attention to movies and books and things like that. Yeah. So in the end, it was an asset. You know,
nice.
Yeah, and like so like I really completely did the video game thing because like the last video game system I owned was like Nintendo, and then occasionally like in college it was roommates had a gaming system, and I'd have to be really careful because I'm much like you, Mike. I would catch myself at like 4 in the morning, like I gotta beat this level, and you know, I think that I think I'm not saying video games are bad. For my personality, I felt like the video games were virtually pacifying my need to make and beat obstacles and make stuff. Yeah. And to me, I'd rather beat the obstacles on this thing because that I end up with something.
Yeah, totally.
Whereas like 4 in the morning when you've beaten the level, what did you get? Did you get a virtual trophy?
Yeah, you get nothing.
It's just like, it's not, it's, you know, and I also understand there's a social element to it with MMOs and stuff like that. But my point being like, and I also don't want to come across wrong because we've touched on this. If you guys want to look, like even through this blog or like through Scott's blog, or, you know, or Mike's blog, like we've all touched on, like it is important to take breaks. It is important not to like make art your entire purpose of existence because, like, for one thing, like, you know, if you live in a bubble and you're just, let's say you're making comics, you're only reading comics, then your comics are always going to be what came before. It's if all you live is comics, you know, your writing's going to suffer, right? You need to kind of like read and enjoy entertainment so you can get ideas and get inspiration. Totally important. But I feel like a lot of people justify like laziness by just being like, oh, you know, you've earned a break. And it's like, no, you haven't earned it until, you know, it like, I don't know. I guess somebody help me.
Well, it's like everything in moderation, right? Like you have to prioritize what it is that you want. Like for myself, as far as the game stuff goes, or just relaxation in general, like
Yeah.
I have, my whole day is dedicated to work and art, and that's it. And then when Mel comes home, which her schedule varies, but it's usually later, we have dinner. We will watch something like while we're eating. And if it extends beyond, like once we've finished actually eating, if the show is still going, we'll finish that show. We go for a short 10-minute walk, and then I go back to work. And that's it. And that gives me enough time to spend a couple hours visiting with Mel every day, which is good. But I still get back to my work. I don't have like personal recreation time, you know what I mean? Because one, I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm going to feel a lot better about myself at the end of the day and at the end of the week if I've been working as opposed to if I didn't. So it's kind of a mental health issue too. But for two, it's prioritizing as well, because then come the weekend, I force myself that on Saturday, that's Mel's day. That's like whatever she wants to do. We're just hanging out. We're being a family. A lot of times we visit family, and that's just what we do. Because no matter what happens, I'm such a night owl that even if I spent the whole day hanging out with Mel and with family, I'm still going to have like 4 hours at the end of the night where everyone else is sleeping and I'm up, and I could still get some work in, And then come Sunday, that's like my, it's similar to Saturday, but it usually ends a lot earlier. And then I get a full like 8-hour workday in leading into Sunday night. But again, like I schedule time in. I could do whatever I want on the weekend. That's like my day of rest. But any other time during the week, it's just, that's off limits. It's just not going to happen. Even if friends call and they're like, hey, I'm in town. You want to go out for a drink? Nope, working. What do you mean? You're at home. You don't work. Okay, yeah, but I do. I'm clocked in today. Sorry.
That's the one thing I will do, because if somebody doesn't approach me and say, hey, let's go out, and I don't get those requests a lot, but when I do, I try to take them up on it, just because otherwise I'll never do it, because I won't initiate it. So, and I'm the opposite. Like everyone I live with or know like sleeps in, so I get up early, and that's when I work on stuff.
Oh, cool, perfect.
Yeah, I think like for me, like an example of my personality is like my wife is really good for me, because she like will tell me to take breaks, like when I need to, and like not like a mom or anything, but just in the sense of like just noticing I'm overworking. Because so she's out of town in Utah right now for like a week longer with Benji. And so like I get off work and I get home and I just start drawing. That's it. That's like I feed my dogs and then I just start drawing. And then and then it's bedtime, and like today I forgot to eat. I mean, so that's not healthy either. So like in her absence, I'm going to have to kind of retrain myself in the next few days to like force myself to like, you need to eat, because, and here's the weird thing about my personality is like, I'm justifying even eating just basically because I'm not going to be very productive working on this comic if I'm hungry. That's it. Like,
yeah.
So now keep in mind, like, I feel like totally in line with what you were saying, Scott, because it's like if a friend called up and was like, hey, let's go get a drink or something, I might, for an hour, but I'm not gonna, like, to me, even if I did that, I would be like hating being away from the drawing table. It's just like, and like somebody in the chats, I don't know. Okay, I don't know who Comics Legend is. Do you guys know who that is?
I'm not sure, but he's definitely.
Well, okay. Well,
he knows his stuff because he's talking about Jack Kirby. So
he mentioned Jack Kirby's output. He said he worked on 3,130 interior pages and 285 colors, pretty much a book a week. So like that's kind of like the mantle of like. That's the thing that annoys me about people who are calling themselves cartoonists who aren't working at least as hard as I am, or as hard as Scott and Mike are. Like, it's like we're not the most dedicated to this. this, you know? Like, if you watch, like, the documentary on Crumb, it's crazy. The guy's drawing all the time. I had an instructor in art school who got in, like, an auto accident because they were drawing in their car. They couldn't stop drawing. They, like, actually, it was, like, something they medically had to take care of. So, and I'm not saying that's healthy. I'm just saying, like, when I apply for a job, that guy who's drawing so often he almost got in a car crash might be applying for the same thing. I'm not, and I'm not saying that's healthy, because, like, if he gets into a car crash, he's not going to be applying for much, right? So
maybe insurance.
And at that point, you kind of win on the output, right? Because he got way too into it. But my point being, like it should be hard to not do it. I guess that's the part that, and if you're not at the point where it's hard to not draw, then you need to keep drawing, and you need to quit doing stupid shit like video games for a week and try to hit the drawing table in your video game time, you know? Because that's what I find really common with people who say they don't have time. You ask them about their day, and inevitably they have time. Like, if I have time to read my kid a bedtime story, to hang out with my wife, to, like, play with my son till he's asleep, and then knock out comics, and to work, you know, a day job, like, I don't understand how somebody doesn't have time on top of those things, you know? Because I do think family is important and stuff, but it's just like, how are you not having the time? I don't know. Hey. Yeah, so, yeah. Sorry, I get pissed about this kind of stuff.
No, I get what you were saying. I bring a sketchbook with me everywhere. That's kind of, when I was younger, I used to bring a whole backpack everywhere. Some people thought I was really weird because I pretty much had, like, sketchbooks. I had How to Draw the Marvel Way, like, pretty much anything that was inspiring me at the time, and anything I needed to create any kind of art that I would want to make was in this backpack. And so if I left the house, the backpack came with me. And people thought I was so weird. So I would go out bowling with my friends, or we'd go to, like, the bar, or we'd go to a party or whatever. I always had this backpack. People thought I was like a drug dealer or something. But it was just full of sketchbooks and pencils and shit.
Yeah, it's just that
because
like,
you never know, you know? Yeah. Now I've condensed it, so now I got this little, like, man purse type thing that I got all kinds of looks, but it's just got my sketchbook and some pencils and whatever, and I take that everywhere. So even when I'm out with family, I can sketch. Like, if we go out to dinner, I can sketch while we're waiting for our food, you know? No one thinks anything of it. That's just who I am. Most of the time they're like, oh, what are you drawing? I'm drawing this. Oh, that's cool. So anyways, Jenny and Billy were over, you know? Like, it doesn't have to be a hard thing to find time to do. You just gotta make it your life if that's what you're into, you know, because art takes time, and it's a long road if you want to get good at it. So you might as well put in the time every chance you got, I think.
My point was just like, and if you're not going to, then just do the courtesy of just give it up. Like, seriously.
Oh man, I don't know about that. That's pretty harsh. That's pretty harsh.
I'm gonna go on, like, an apology tour on it. There's gonna be a couple artists who are like, I'm 5 and I picked up crayon, and then I decided not to because this mean guy, Joshua Kemble. What a jerk. No, it's just like I mean, to me, it's just one of those things of, like, take your art form seriously, and by seriously, don't take it too seriously, because it is, like, at the end of the day, it's a piece of paper, right? Or it's a canvas, and it's like, you know, like, I wouldn't put so much meaning into it that if you, like, say, lost your hand, your whole life would be over. Like, that's why it's important to, like, invest in, like, things like, you know, your family and, like, friends and things like, you know, like, there's all sorts of stuff, like, all sorts of studies that they've done of people, like, on their deathbed, and rarely do those people say, like, man, I wish I had worked more, you know? Like, that's rarely the last thought on somebody's mind. Most of the time, it's like, I wish I had spent more time with my son, I wish I had spent more time with, you know, my mom, or whatever it is, right? So, like, I'm just saying that to hedge what I've been saying before, which is like, I understand there are valuable things in life that that might even, at least to some people, to me in particular, those things I value more than my comics. But, I am competing with people who they put comics above all that, So that's just the reality of the industry, and that's also the reality of just like what makes people good, what gives people good output. Like most people I know who have a better page rate than I do, for output, it's not just because they have a simpler style. A lot of the time, it's like they're literally working longer than I am. That's
you get a page rate drawing your own comics, Josh? How do I do that?
Oh, I meant rate of turnover for pages. Sorry. Yeah. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I don't know. In my workplace, it's not easy what I do. Professionally, doing graphic design, doing illustration, it's a hustle. It's hard, and you're working all cylinders. And if you're not all cylinders, you get buried in revisions. That's just the nature of where I work. If somebody came in and was like, "This shouldn't be work," and they're getting paid to do it, I would look at them like they were insane. It is work. It's hard. And that's the professional stuff that I'm not as passionate about, So I don't know. I guess I just don't understand this. Maybe there are some people who just it's super fun all the time, and then if it's not fun, they quit. I don't know.
I've heard that a lot. If it's not fun, then why are you doing it? Stuff like that, which, I mean, I can kind of get maybe where they're coming from, but I feel like to get good and to get, I don't know, far down that art journey, you kind of have to go through times where it's not always fun. There's some things that aren't fun, and you just have to kind of find ways to make them fun, I guess, or just get through them. Oh man, Adam Lohr and I were talking about this a little while ago, and he shared a quote with me from John Kricfalusi, I think is how you pronounce his name, John K., the creator of Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, when you're practicing and when you're trying to get good, you're going to go through stages that essentially aren't fun. There's these ugly stages of your work. There's this period where things just aren't clicking. Nothing's looking good. Nothing's coming together, and it's frustrating, and you feel like you're going to give up. And his advice, what he says, is you just have to eat the pain. You just have to eat the pain because I think he and anyone else who's done this for any period of time that cares and wants to improve, it can be painful sometimes. Sometimes you get to points where it is boring or it is frustrating or it's not turning out well. But the only way to get beyond that is to keep doing it. So I disagree with that sentiment of, well, if it's not fun, then why are you doing it? Because in order to do it at all, well, you have to do it at periods that aren't going to be fun. It's just the way it is. I mean, I think for most people, I can't speak for everybody. Maybe it's all just, a joy to a lot of people. But
well, I think that's a thing to kind of. I think that if somebody is really good at it and they're saying that there's no pain to it, I'd say they're probably lying. I mean, that's or they're maybe selling something or something like hey, join our art school. It's all fun. I don't know, but my point is with if you wanted to have fun, where for me, I'm just starting to exercise, and all of that ties into the comic too, as well as to family and work and stuff like that, because I just found that I was getting tired a lot, and I was like, I don't like feeling tired all the time, and I don't sleep a ton, but it's just feeling constantly exhausted is not a fun experience. And I realized, I just don't exercise. I've never been a person who exercises. So I've started to, build the routine of exercise. And the first, first day was awesome. And then you feel the pain, right? Like you were saying, you literally feel it the next day. Every muscle in your body hurts. And then you have to kind of work through that to build a habit, and now it's fun. I'm actually having fun with it. And you know, every time it gets a little too comfortable, I have to kind of up the weight, right? And I'm not like a bodybuilder or anything. My point is just like to exercise effectively and to get to that point of like catharsis where you're kind of enjoying it and you almost zone out and it's a fun thing, which I've never really experienced with exercise before. So I'm kind of digging that. Like there's a little bit, it's like a high almost, like, but that only lasts for so long until the weight gets easy and it's not doing anything. And then you have to kind of either level up or just like be bored. Like you're not going to have that. You don't hit that peak unless you kind of like keep gradually climbing with what you're challenging yourself with. And I think that's for any positive thing, not just art, you know? So like to me, if I just, like I could, in the position I'm in, Scott could too, Mike, you could probably do this as well. Like when you're done with your drawing thing, I don't think you'd have difficulty getting a full-time art gig. I think right now you wouldn't have problems with that, you know? Any of us could like, you could do that and go, okay, I'm getting paid, done. Like, and I know people like that. They're like, I've got my career, done. That's it. I'm not going to keep putting up the weights because I like this weight. It's really easy.
No.
Those people that I've met who think that way or who work that way, they usually find themselves like staying here at their workplace. They aren't going to go anywhere. And they stay here like on an emotional level. They never have highs and they never have lows. They're like the most unhappy people I've met because they don't have those peaks. And to me, I'd rather be in that world of like little low, high peak, little low, high peak, you know? And I think hopefully as long as that arc is going up, right? Like in skill. I don't know. That's a really long-winded way of saying it, but the point being, like, I really do think you have to work at this. And if you know, and if you don't, I think you're cheating yourself of your own abilities, like where you could be as an artist, even if you're making tons, you know. So I'm not qualifying because I know artists who are amazing who do, you know, who can't get a job, like any job, and they're better than any artist I know. Outside of that are professionals, right? So yeah, I mean, there's, you know, but at the same time, what makes them great is the fact that they're still, like, to me, I respect somebody without a job who's an excellent artist, who's constantly working at it, than somebody who's getting paid millions and is like a mediocre artist and they you know, it's like that band that gets comfortable after they get signed and write terrible albums. You know, like I'd rather listen to the indie band that's just constantly getting better and better and better than that. You know.
Well, speaking of jobs, there's a conversation going on in the chat about, you know, basically being after work, just coming home and just being so exhausted after work that you don't have, you know, you can't do artwork. So I don't know if you guys, I mean, I know, you know, Mike, you're kind of doing your own thing. I know Josh and I both have kind of day jobs. I don't know, we're able to do that, but I mean, I guess how do we do that? What advice could we give to somebody who has kind of that issue? I don't know. It's hard for me. It's just hard because it's like second nature. I mean, because I look forward to that time when I come home and I have to work on other stuff. Now, granted, maybe I don't know everyone's position. I don't know what they do, and maybe it's really, you know, manual labor type job or something like that where you're just super exhausted. I mean, I'm not physically exhausted, but you know, mentally, I'm, you know, I still have to, you know, put some effort into like, oh, you know, I could go home and just crash or whatever, but yeah, I got stuff I want to do. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, like what Jen M is saying in the chat, you know, that for her job, she says she walks up to 5 miles a day in a full day shift, and she reconfigures her schedule. So she does the hardest stuff in the beginning of the day before she goes to that job, and then does the easiest stuff after she gets home. And that would be my best advice, would be something like that. You have to kind of play to your strengths and work around it. If it means you got to get up earlier, then you have to get up earlier. If you work better later, then you have to force yourself and work later. You have to find out what works best for you and make it work however you can, you know. I've had all kinds of different jobs that have put all kinds of different roadblocks in my way, and no matter what, I've always found some way to do it. And I've done everything from construction to working at UPS to working in hospitality to working at a bar to shoveling rocks at a golf course to a number of different stuff. And somehow, some way, I've always found time, and that's with going to work and juggling school most of the time. So I don't know. I feel like kind of a jerk sometimes, but I honestly, there's very few situations that I can see where you can't find the time. Now, I've never had kids though, so that's the one aspect that I'll say I just have to shut up on. I don't know anything about that. I don't know that world, so I can't speak to that. But as long as you don't have kids, you can find time. I'm telling you, you have time.
Yeah.
If you have a new car and you're in like those first like 2 months, you probably aren't going to have any time at all. But because you're gonna like wake up and then you're gonna be asleep. I mean, like for 2 hours and then you wake up again. And there are some people who have to work 2 jobs, you know, because maybe they're having debt or just were born in a, you know, like just there's a lot of people who just like it's one of the reasons I'm kind of a liberal politically. Not that I'm going to get into that, but the point being like, you know, there's this idea in America of like people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, but like there are some people who like have no bootstraps. Like they just like you can't say everybody's starting on an even playing field, because that's just not the case. Like some people, you know, like everything I'm saying for advice goes out the window if you were born with like a mental disability that like prevents you from walking or something. Like I can just imagine like somebody like, you know, in Stephen Hawking's position just being like, what do you do if you can't move? You know, like, well, then, yeah, I mean, clearly, like, there's going to be exceptions. And there's, you know, like single moms who like have like multiple kids and have to work multiple jobs. Like, you know, it's not easy, and it's not necessarily for everybody. But like for me, like I think back to like this isn't the hardest time in my life to do art at all, because I went through a lot of that hardest time stuff to get to where it's still hard after like a 2-hour commute and, you know, working 8 to 10 hours to sit down at the art table. It is really hard, but it's not as hard as it used to be. And part of why it's not as hard as it used to be is because I went through some crazy stuff. Like I used to work graveyard shifts at an AM PM, and I was full time. And to get through the junior college and to be able to transfer to just a college to go for my BFA, because like my family had like no money. So, you know, to do that, like I literally had to get off of work at, you know, 7 in the morning. I had to take night classes that were before work at school, and then I had to sleep, like, you know, and if you guys work graveyards, you'll know how that is. It really screws with your head. Like your sleep schedule gets out of whack. It's insane. And I did that for, you know, 2.5 years to get through junior college, just to be able to get my degree, like my transfer credits, and move on to a 4-year college. And like, you know, at the time I was going to school with people who were not working in graveyards and were still there when I left, because they were just farting around on campus. They weren't interested in like, you know, actually passing the classes and moving forward. And so it's like, you know, if I had to work 2 of those jobs, like if I had to work, say I got off my graveyard and then I had to go to a day job, I don't know if that would be a possibility, but the point being, like, the way you work through it is you just look at your situation. Like, to me at that time, I was just like, I want to be an artist, and I'm a cashier at an AM/PM. Like, do I want to die at an AM PM? Is this where have I hit the ceiling? If not, like, I have to find a way to make it work. And part of that was just, I talked to my instructors. I was like, if I fall asleep in your class, it's not because I'm bored. It's like, I haven't slept, you know? And so they like work with me on it. Like, they smack me to wake me up. Like, it's just like, like, you can't wait for somebody to just come and give you art skills and get you better at art skills. Like, because really, it's just going to happen with work. So that's the conundrum. That's like, I think that's the conundrum that drives like Scott and myself to do it when we get home, and Mike to have done it like this whole time before having this break. You know, like, it's not a break because he's working on art, right? But my point being, like, it's just like you use that as fuel. That's your fuel when you're on your drive home and your head is saying, like, I vlog sometimes on my drive home, and usually I'll say something like, I'm so tired, I don't know if I'm gonna even get this done. And I always usually manage to, and it's mainly because on that drive home, I'm having that conversation with myself. Like, I'm like, I have this long commute, I'm driving 10 miles an hour, I'm stuck in traffic, you know, like, it's gonna be 3 hours before I get home, how am I gonna get my comic done? But then I remind myself, like, I want my comic done. That's the thing. You have to really think about, like, what do you want? Like, do you want to be a good artist? If you want to be a better artist, you're gonna have to have time. And so it's just like going, which is more valuable to me, like, you know?
Yeah, I think if you were to just take a week and do a time audit, like everything you do, you jot it down, you're going to find there's time that you're wasting, even though you might not think you are.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there's times and there's ways you can get things in when you might not even think about it. Like you said, Josh, when you're driving home, well, what else do you do? You're just driving. So why not vlog? Why not communicate and then just throw it up on YouTube? I mean, you're otherwise you're just kind of wasting time. Like when I'm drawing or if I'm driving, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm trying to educate myself when, you know, and I've found certain time to do certain things. Like on my lunch hour, I take about 20 minutes to eat, and then the rest of that I'm working on my comics. So that's like my 100 days of making comics, 30 minutes a day is on my lunch hour because it's constant, you know, and every once in a while I've got to run an errand or something, so I can't fit it in there. But for the most part, I'm working on my comic on my lunch hour. So that's time I've set aside for that. But there's got to be, if you really seriously look at your schedule and everything, and like I was saying before, I mean, there's tons of times where I really need to do what Mike's talking about and bring a sketchbook. I've always been bad about that. I mean, I do sketches and things, but I never really kept a sketchbook. And I at some point I gotta really commit to that because, you know, having something with you, it's like wherever you are, because there's so many times where there's just downtime and I find myself, you know, just pop in if I'm in a line or something. Well, it's kind of hard if you're in a line to maybe do a sketch, but there's other situations where I'm just like waiting for something where I could be sketching when I just go on my phone and like browse through the social media and stuff. So.
Yeah, and like, I think another thing is like the temptations to start thinking like, well, like this is my head does this too, and I love art. Like I love, like when I get home and I finally sit down for that first 10 minutes are always hard because it's that inner battle of like I want to watch Game of Thrones. Well, no, I need to sit down for at least like 15 minutes and just try, you know? And then like once I'm at the table, it's usually like 2 minutes in that I just get lost, and then I'm like, I actually have to force myself to stop because I'm like, I'm just going to be in trouble if I keep drawing. Like I won't sleep tomorrow. Like I won't get enough sleep to work, you know, or whatever. But like there is this voice, I think, in everybody's head when they're hitting challenges. Like if you have a hard taxing job and you don't have a lot of time and energy, that's usually going to be the excuses. Or like I was saying, like the treat yourself kind of thing, where it's like, oh, I did good at work, I deserve a beer, or whatever it is, you know? It's like justifications for not doing it. And what I'm trying to get at with this is like, not all of those justifications are fake, but you should, as an artist, always question your justifications for not working on it. You know? Like, do you really not have time? Do you really not have energy? Or do you just not put time and energy that you put elsewhere into what you're doing? Like when you get home, do you sit and veg out for 10 minutes to just relax from the hard day at work? So like, couldn't that 10 minutes be spent drawing? Whether you feel exhausted or not, just force yourself and see what happens. You know, I think what would happen for most people, and this isn't everybody, because like I said, there's some people who work like 2 jobs, or you know, like you know, you're lifting heavy things all day, so you like physically can't move after work. But most people, I think, if they sit down and they spend a little time with it, like, will be surprised. Like, I found that for myself, because like my son, like the first 2 years of his life, I only did art at work that I was getting paid to do, and then when I got home, I didn't really work on personal projects because I didn't feel like I had time. But so I had to kind of reforce myself to like sit down and do the whole thing, and I don't regret it, because like it feels good to be making stuff. It really does.
Definitely. Something I think to add on to that, something proactive that you can do to kind of start figuring out what your time is and how you're spending it, is to do like a journal. It doesn't even have to be anything complicated either. Like I think when most people think of journals, they think, oh, I don't have time for that either. But just get a spiral notebook and just make it a point. Like if you really care about making that time, make it a point every day. At the end of the day, spend like 5 minutes. Not even. You don't even need 5 minutes, and just write down whether or not you did the thing that you care about. Like, so if it's drawing, say you want to be drawing every day, you can't find the time. Take a minute to 5 minutes every day, write down whether or not you drew and why you did or didn't. And that's it. Don't get elaborate about it. Don't write about how Joe pissed you off in accounting or anything like that. It's not that kind of journal. Just write whether or not you drew or not and why you did or didn't. And if you do that over enough time, I'm talking months, you'll start to see patterns. And once you see the patterns, you can start to recognize what it is that can either help you or what it is that's hurting you. What, you know, you can really zone in on that and figure out how you can maybe change some things so that you can start drawing every day. And it's something that I know a few people who've tried it and it's worked for them. And it's something that for me has just totally rocked my world. I was getting really deep into it where I was keeping track of multiple things, and I was shocked and ashamed at how I was spending my time, because sometimes you're wasting time in areas that you're not even realizing you're wasting time in, you know? I got really deep and started tracking like how often I went on Facebook, how often, this was when I was still smoking, so how many cigarettes I had in the day, and I was able to kind of estimate how much time that soaked up, and just all kinds of stuff. Time was going out the window everywhere. And once I had that information, it was a lot easier to kind of figure out how I could start working drawing and comics back into my day, to the point where now it's completely taken over. Like it had a profound impact on my life. And that was just seeing where my time was going, you know?
Yeah, I think it's almost like you hear this all the time on like financial shows and stuff, where people will say, if you want to, like, you know, like I'm mimicking like a financial analyst or whatever, but usually they'll be like, so you feel like you don't have enough money, map out where you're spending your money. That's where you start.
Yeah.
If you ever want to pay off debt or anything like that, it always starts with, well, what are you spending now? And like maybe a week or a month of like really budgeting, like honestly budgeting. So the $5 at Starbucks, or the $2 on this thing here, and like all the things that you casually buy. And a lot of people find themselves after doing that, looking at their budget and going, holy crap, I'm wasting a lot of money. You know, why don't we view time like that? I mean, like, our time is what we get paid for at a job, you know, and it's very valuable. It's a very valuable resource.
You can get money back. You can't get time back. So it's even more valuable than money. Exactly.
And like I said, if it weren't valuable, like, you wouldn't get paid for the time you work, like, most of the time. It's a commodity that's definitely worth budgeting, you know, and figuring out, like, what is it that, like, like seriously, like most of the time, most artists I know, at least the artists in my life, I'm not talking about online or anything like that, but the artists I come across that are most productive, when they get home, they work on comics. When they get home, they work on posters. When they, like the ones that do it full time and are really successful at illustration, if they want to do illustration, they'll get off work at illustration and then they will work on illustration. Like it's just, that's how you get more work. You get done with your client work and then you get the next client. That's how I did it for 15 years. Like those clients did not come to me because I was the best artist in the world. They could have hired a ton of artists who were a lot better than me. They came to me, especially early on, they came to me because I hustled and I contacted the art director and I bugged them and I did the work to have in the portfolio to get the work, right? And then when I was done with that work, I was hunting for the next work, which is part of why I took a full-time gig, because that's actually some of the least time I had too, was when I was working from home. But anyhow, the point being, like, it's just, and I remember when I was freelance, it was very frustrating to meet in-house designers who were like, oh, I wish I could freelance. And you're like, if you wished you could freelance when you got off work, you would freelance and you would hunt for freelance and you would like chase freelance clients, because that's what I did so I could quit my job, my day job, and freelance. If you really want it, you're going to make the time and you'll find yourself really exhausted from it because it's a lot of work. It's like, that's why it's artwork. Like, to me, I think that's the thing. There's no mystical power to it. It's just time. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like I said, I don't really know what to say to somebody. Like I said, when my son was first born, if somebody told me like you're not making enough time to draw, I would have punched him in the face. Yeah. You're sleep debt and you're like literally like clinically insane for like 2 months. Because most people, I know have gone through like the first few months, man, of having a kid. Like you literally you don't have time.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'd also say has helped me budget my time, is having a kid, because when you have a kid and you have somebody, like, to me, my kid is more important than my art, and I have to budget time for him. And when I budgeted time taking care of him, especially those first 2 months where you like feel like I'm sleeping 2 hours and I got to go to work and then I got to get home and I got to make the bottle and like all this crap, it's like, it's crazy. But within that, I remember having this like really clear as day epiphany of like, I thought I was working hard at art and like had no time. And this was at a point where I'd already sacrificed and built a habit and stuff like that. And after having a kid, I was like, I had so much time. Like, I had no idea how much time I had and how idiotic I was with my time. And so now it's like I'm regimented with my time, and that helped, because having a kid, it's like, my time is like literally 8:30 when my son's asleep. That's my time for the majority of my life till he's older, So I've got 8:30 till however long it takes before I will not be able to walk in and work tomorrow. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Scott, did you have a similar thing with having kids? Because I mean, like, to me, like, that was a huge thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I remember when my oldest son was a baby. Like, he, just to get him to go to bed, you had to like bounce him on your legs. So I would be sitting at my drawing desk and he'd be across my legs, and I'd just be bouncing him while I'm drawing. So yeah, that's, there's multitasking for you, but yeah, I mean, it's been a while, I mean, now my kids are at the age where, they occupy themselves and they can kind of, do all that stuff. So they don't require as much attention, I mean, I still set aside time like to go out and do stuff. We just went out last Saturday and we went to this arcade thing and we bowled and we did like these ropes course and laser tag, all that kind of stuff. So I still, you know, it's all about, you know, like Mike was saying, you got to budget your time. You know, I always set time aside for my kids and my girlfriend, but you know, and also, you know, I'm divorced, so my kids are with me. You know, well now it used to be 30%. I mean, it used to be 50% of the time. Now it's probably more like 30 now because they're, you know, when I'm working, they're usually over at their moms and stuff like that because they're not in school right now and everything. But so they're not always with me, so that's part of it too. But yeah, you just I don't know. You gotta audit that time and figure out when you can do things and you know, definitely figure out what's important because family is important. You got to make time for family and everything. But when they're super little, yeah, it's near impossible, you know. But you can do what I did and just bounce your kid on your leg, or you know, while you're drawing or whatever. You know, you figure stuff out.
And then coming out of that, though, are you more aware of like how much time you have to budget with? Like now that you have a clearer schedule than you did when, say, they were like 2.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that's it. I mean, so basically, just have kids. I'm just kidding. That's a personal choice you all have to make on your own. But it is amazing how much time you have, and when you're aware of, like, when you literally do not have time, it becomes clear as day. Seeing like times in your past where you did have time and you felt like you didn't. You know, there's a difference between feeling and reality. You know, and so that's where like I get a big tip off too. Like I don't know, I'm not going to call the person who commented in comments because I don't want to like pick on them or anything. Like, but I did read somebody talking about feeling exhausted and feeling like they didn't have time. And to me, the big tip-off was the word feeling, because if you are exhausted, there's a big difference than feeling. And to me, like the feeling word, and maybe I'm just being silly, but to me, that's the way that my subconscious speaks when it tries to get me to not work, like all of the time, you know. And it's usually followed with, like it usually goes that way. You worked really hard, you need to sit down, you know. And I struggled with that. I struggle with that with every positive thing I've done in my life, including spending time with my wife. I love spending time with my wife, but I do have to prioritize it. There are times, you know, in marriage where you don't feel like spending time, but you have to budget it because you understand it's important, at least for me. And by doing that, it's made it more enjoyable to spend that time. So now I don't even have to like remind myself. You know what I mean? But there will be periods, I think, like that in relationships and anything. And like I said, it's about who you want to invest in, what you want to invest in, that kind of thing. You know, because like I think Corey mentioned this in the chats, but it's like, yeah, what you're doing kind of does define who you are a little bit, you know? Like, I don't know. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think you're touching on a lot of like the subconscious. What we feed into it is what we get out too. So I mean, if you're telling yourself you don't have time, even when time suddenly opens up, you're not receptive to see it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like watch a practice. You know, I mean, it's weird. I'm not into sports, but watch an athlete train. You know, like they have a trainer who's basically telling them to shut the hell up and keep going. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have like a runner who's getting as far as they think they can go, and they're like, I can't. And there's somebody going, shut up, you can't. Like, and if it's not somebody, it's them telling themselves that. Like, you know, like the friends I have who are really excellent, like way more fit than me, I've seen them work out and they'll be like, you know, 200 push-ups? No, I can do 300. Like they push themselves beyond what they thought. Like when their body starts feeling like it's done, they go 10 more. You know what I mean? That's how they got bigger than me. And it would be silly for me to think I'm going to get any bigger by going, oh, I'm tired, I'm done. You know, like, it's like, which, by the way, I'm not aiming to be a bodybuilder. So, like, for me, if I get the energy, I'm done. But, like, if they keep pushing, they're naturally going to be more athletic than I am, right? It's the same thing. It's you have, in order to do great things, you have to push yourself beyond what you think you can do. And if you don't, I don't think you're going to get much better. You know, just like the first time you draw a building in perspective sucks. You know, and then it gets easier, and then you choose a different weird perspective that really sucks. it's very much like Mike, the thing you were saying about feeling. What was it about pain again?
Eat the pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just got to eat the pain and carry on.
Yeah. Word.
It sounds so simple, but that's been something that's been really helpful to me. And that came from listening to to Kevin and you, Scott, and Gaz. And I think the more you try to connect with other artists that are doing what you want to do, and you're kind of humble about it and open to hearing what they have to say too, instead of like coming up with excuses, you start to kind of get some truths dropped on you, and some get closer to understanding things as they are, instead of kind of that dialogue that we tell ourselves. Like, I don't know. For me, like I said, I thought I was working hard enough already, and I learned that I really wasn't. And since then, I've changed my game up entirely. And even since then, I've changed it up even more. What I'm doing now is kind of crazy to a lot of people. And I've actually had a couple people sort of try to discourage me from doing it, even telling me that it's kind of like a waste of time, that I don't need to. But I'm really going with my gut on this one, and just knowing that I could use to push myself a little bit further, especially if I want to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish with my art. I'm just not there yet. Got to keep pushing. And so, I don't know, thinking about that kind of stuff, I've started looking into other artists, and some, that aren't around anymore to ask any questions, but some that are, still alive, and trying to look into what do they do? What's a work day like for them? A big thing for me with the main comic that I want to make, and it's not Space Cat. It's actually the comic I started the 100-day challenge for, that I opted not to do because I'm totally not ready yet. But I realized after doing Julie Jupiter, the comic I did for the anthology, that I'm in no position to make that comic, and that comic is so important to me. Like, I have to make that comic. And in order for me to do that, my skill has to be so much better than where it's at now. Like, my skill has to be at a level of some of these guys that are like working for Marvel and DC. Like, that's the only way I will be able to accomplish the art that I need to accomplish for that comic. And I've been kind of kidding myself, thinking that's not the case, And so thinking about that, I was like, damn, well, I'm not there yet. What kind of rubric can I measure myself against to get there? So I started looking into a lot of my favorites, and it turns out they put a lot of work in every day, and that's a key ingredient. And so I've sort of made a lesson plan for myself built around all these influences of mine, and I'm nowhere near it. I'm not trying to pretend like this is happening tomorrow at all. This is a long journey, probably years, but I have a path that I'm trying to hit now. And it's crazy. It's crazy for me to look at it and think like, all right, your goal is to someday you got to be able to do a page a day, like a finished page a day, and be able to easily put in 12 hours of work every day on your comic. I'm not there yet. I could put in 12 hours of work, but on one thing, I got to build up to that. I just have to build up to that. I'm usually like all over the place, so anyways, I don't know if that was a tangent or if that went along with what we were saying, but I guess, the biggest point was just that no matter where you're at or what you want to do, you could always use to push yourself a little further. And sometimes it helps to know exactly how far you're trying to push too, because I think that way you sort of avoid the burnout as well. Because you got people that it's one thing if you have a deadline or something like that, but you have some people that get really crazy for like a short burst and then they're useless for months. You know, it's like they burn themselves out. But if you have a long-term plan, well, then it's not something that you need to accomplish in a weekend or a one-shot thing that you need to do. It's a way of life you have to cultivate. You know, that's really what it boils down to. It's not even a mile marker that you're trying to run to. It's how can I keep running just all the time? How can I sleep while running? To give a weird analogy, but that's really what it boils down to, you know?
Yeah, Corey just said, I remember thinking I was busy as a student and now I wish I had that much time. I totally agree, because like I pulled like all-nighters and stuff in college, and I just thought that was so hardcore. But I also spent a lot of time just like hanging out with friends, like drinking, you know, like, and
Yeah.
so like that is a good example of like a time in my life, like my own life, where I felt like I have no time. I'm just so busy. I'm such a hard worker. And then when I really audited it, I was just like, oh yeah, I have a lot of time. So like, you know, I think that what you're getting at with like the practice thing too is like it can touch on one other thing dealing with this, which is like, while all of this is good, like, you know, it is very possible you could like train in boxing and do all this stuff and go up against somebody who's way bigger than you. Like, let's say you're I don't know, what are the weights in fights?
Middleweight, heavyweight, featherweight.
Okay. So you're a featherweight, right? And you train and train and train and train, and you're short and you're not like a big person, and you go up against a guy who's massive and trained a little less. Just because you train more doesn't mean you're going to be able to take that guy down. Like, there are some limitations that are beyond, like, for instance, like there are some artists you might aspire to be as good as, and you will never get there, you know?
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
I wouldn't put that on the forefront of your mind as like, I will never get there. Like, the aim should always be, I will get there. But the point being, like, I think as long as, like, all of this is within reason, because you don't want to, you want the balance. You want the things that'll keep you having momentum and not getting burned out. Because burnout is when you're like hitting the gym, you know, you haven't really built up slowly, and you just lift 300 pounds and throw out your back or whatever. I don't know why I keep making so many. It's just like inevitable, I guess. You can make war analogies too, right? Like, you're a new general and you're going to take on like a general who's won 20 wars. Like, you're going to lose. You know, like, you can't just walk into the war. But you can start fighting little battles and getting better and better and learning. And at some point, you might win a small war. Maybe you don't win the world, but you win the little battles that you set for yourself. So I think that gets into goal setting, which maybe we can get into, you know, some other time, or if you guys want, we can dip into it now.
Totally.
But I think that gets into the importance of goals, because it's kind of like when you're training, you know, like setting a finish line is important, because, you know, otherwise you'll just keep running until you burn out, right?
True.
Yeah. I think we're coming up on 2 hours, but I think definitely goal setting would be a good topic for another episode.
Yeah.
One thing that I'll add to tack on to that, though, just to cap that up, is and this fits perfect with the go hard or go home thing. Like, the reason, because I totally agree with what you're saying, you have to be realistic with yourself too, you know. And it's not like, well, I won't get on that tangent, but what I wanted to say is the reason I set this crazy sort of goal is I want to get at a certain level to do my own comic, right? And I recognize that I need to be at a certain skill set. There's a saying that I've told myself throughout my whole life. I don't know where this came from. It's ingrained in my mind. I've said it since I was a kid, but it's to have this mentality of shoot for the stars, but always plan to land on solid ground. In other words, shoot as high as you possibly can, because you got one life to get at this stuff. You know what I mean? So you might as well shoot for the top. And even if you don't make it, you're going to be a lot farther than if you just settled for where you're at, or if you shot for something much, much smaller. Like, if all I wanted to do was to make like one comic, just one comic book, one 22-page, whatever, and I shot for that specific goal, I'm going to have a hard time with it. That's just human nature. Like, we psych ourselves out. We see our ultimate goal as intimidating and hard to get. And so that's where all that stuff comes in, where, oh, well, I don't have the time, or this or that. We make excuses. We find ways to put roadblocks in our path. But if your goal is beyond that, say, okay, not just one, I want to make 3. You're probably going to finish the first one just because your goal was to make 3. You might not finish the third one, though, but you'll finish the first one. It's this weird kind of psychological effect that I personally believe in. If you shoot for something huge, you're going to be so much better off than if you shot for something small. And I know some people might disagree with that. I actually have a couple friends that just completely disagree with that. They consider themselves more realists, and you got to approach things pragmatically. But I've never met a pragmatist that's, like, you know, gone on to do insane things. You got to be like a little crazy, I think, to really reach the dreams that you're after. I think that's what I believe. So that's my little sentiment for the go hard or go home, because, you know, it can do you some good too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've criticized, like, if you guys follow this show or my blog, like, I've criticized in the past, like, my younger self, because I used to have the goal of getting an Eisner or whatever. But I have to say, had I not had that goal, which I never got, and you know, I wouldn't, like, once again, it's not a goal. It's just not my final destination. Now it's more about, I want to have the skill.
Mm-hmm.
But the point being, like, had I not had that crazy thought, like, of hitting that, I wouldn't have tried for, like, the Zarek grant. I wouldn't have gotten my first comic done, which opened doors that I didn't imagine, that helped me get my first gig doing educational art, of all things, you know? And if I map it out, that's how like, all of those little things that were driven by that, like, you know, all of those weird goals, like, which all started with this silly little one, which was like, I want to get paid to do my art, you know? That was one. And that seemed really crazy to me for a long time. And then you get paid to do your art. And if that's, you know, like, but like I said, if I didn't have that, like, crazy high goal, I don't think I would have followed the roadmap that allowed me to be in a position where I could be at an art interview for an art director position and be like, dude, I'm qualified. Like, look at my work. Look at these things, you know? So it, like, you know, yeah, we'll get into this more on another episode. But yeah, the goal doesn't equal the destination, but it'll sure get you a hell of a lot further on a path than just, like, shooting for mediocrity, you know? Because right now, like I said, my goal is just to make the best comic I can make. And it's a story that I really want to tell, and it's going to be a long one. So, you know, it's a long haul kind of thing. But that's my goal. And that, you know, I don't know. I think Scott, you know, like, building this whole brand, finishing your comic and stuff, like, I mean, like, that whole series, The Young and the Dead, like, these are kind of ambitious goals, you know? What about you? Like, what's your goalpost when it comes to the go hard or go home? What are you going hard or going home with that?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is to, you know, I want to create a brand that can basically support me and my family. I mean, I'm a long way from that. You know, I'm not anywhere near that. But I began. I mean, I've got the you know, the structure is in place. I mean, I'm at the point where now I've got enough SKUs in my store. It actually looks like a real store, And from there, it's just adding new things, you know, and I'm going to try new things like what I'm working on right here, which is, you know, digital art assets that I can sell like on Creative Market or something like that. So that's a different avenue. You know, in addition to, you know, I'm trying to kind of move into some other passive ways to do this, like where I won't actually have to ship the stuff myself, or digital products, or have like a drop shipper that can do some of that stuff. So, you know, like I said, I'm a long way from that, but I've got the basics in place. So now it's just a matter of building on that and promoting it, and, you know, building my audience and everything, and growing that, you know. So, but that's kind of the end goal, is to just kind of create a brand that people know and love and appreciate and want.
Yeah, and like with that finish line in place, it's gotten far. I think that's the gist of where we were getting at. So we're getting to, like, I think we're past 2 hours, but I feel like this was a pretty good one.
Oh man, this is a really good one. I'm going to listen to it back tomorrow when I'm working. So it's so good.
Thanks for like a lively chat to everybody in the chats. It's so like it. And I know we don't get to mention everybody on the show, but like I really like love this community. I love you guys.
Oh yeah.
Now everybody's like, oh crap, I'm out of here. But the point being, like, it's just cool, and it actually keeps. I think that's part of why it's like so fun. It's like just seeing like everybody kind of. I think all of us creatives that are really in the fight, like, feel passionate about it, you know. So yeah, so let's wrap it up. Mike, where can we check out all your crazy dealings and awesome experiments and amazing art? Where can we check that out?
Oh man, the best place would be Instagram. Another good place, actually, I just opened up my Patreon. I've been sharing videos on there. Otherwise, yeah, just Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Mostly Instagram and Patreon though right now. I've kind of crawled into a little cave recently. Not trying to be antisocial, just really focused on studies right now. So I wanted to keep it as easy and simple as possible for me to share what I'm up to, while also still being able to communicate with people who care about what I'm doing. So I figured, hey, Patreon and Instagram, there we go. So
awesome. And you can find me at this channel. And Scott, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, so as far as me, you can find me pretty much Serkworks on most of the social networks. I'm more active on some of them rather than others, but I'm on Instagram, and I've got a Twitter account, which I don't really use. But if you tweet at me, I will get it and I will respond. Facebook, all that stuff, and of course YouTube at Serkworks Art Labs on YouTube. And yeah, I got a shop. It's madsciencesupplycompany.com. And again, yeah, like Josh said, I want to thank everyone in the chat. And if you like the show and you want to hear more of the show, the way we do this is we rotate it back and forth from Josh's channel to my channel. We always try to get a third guest chair, and today that is Mike. And we kind of rotate that around to get some different people. And Mike's kind of semi-regular. We try to get him on as much as we can. But yeah, so if you want to know where we're broadcasting from, what channel we're going to be on, the best way to do that is to go to our newsletter. And there's a link in the description there. Just click on that and subscribe to our news channel, our newsletter. And we don't spam you or anything. We just try to send out about 30 minutes in advance if we can. It's just send out a notice so you know when we're going live. It's usually Wednesdays. Sometimes it's Thursdays. And on the Blue Moon, we'll do it on another day, just if we got weird schedules. But so you know when it is and where it is, just subscribe to that newsletter. And that's all I got to say.
Awesome. Josh? So I guess we'll sign out, and just I hope for everybody who's watched this far, go out, kick some ass, and push yourself a little further than you thought you could go. All right, we'll talk to you guys later.